In this video, I will be discussing two of the most iconic Promethean figures, Victor Frankenstein from the novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and Walter White from the TV series Breaking Bad. Victor Frankenstein serves as a reminder of the monster within all of humanity and is a timeless character in pop culture today. And Walter White's transformation from a father suffering with cancer to Heisenberg, the ruthless and greedy drug kingpin, has made Breaking Bad one of the most critically acclaimed television series ever made. By investigating the Promethean traits of both Victor and Walt, we can better understand these troubled characters and why they remain so fascinating yet horrifying to us. First, let's take a look at what makes Victor Frankenstein such an influential Promethean figure. Here are Victor's most dominant Promethean traits. Victor has an intense thirst for knowledge that starts out as a natural curiosity about nature and science. When Victor's professor takes him to his laboratory and encourages him to advance his scientific studies, Victor recalls that this was the day that decided his future destiny. But Victor's thirst for knowledge takes a dark turn when he shifts his focus to learning about the structure of the human frame. As he seeks to understand the principles and causes of life and death, he becomes more disturbed by his discoveries. Victor is ambitious to a fault. As he advances in his studies, knowledge alone becomes unfulfilling to him, and a craving for power takes over. Victor becomes determined to break through the bounds of life and death by reanimating life using various body parts from a graveyard. An entire season passes, but Victor does not notice, nor does he bother to respond to the letters from his family, because he is too wrapped up in his quest to reanimate life. Victor's ambition shields him from his two strongest links to humanity, his family and his appreciation of nature. As Victor becomes further invested in his ambition to reanimate life, he becomes incredibly troubled. But this is nothing in comparison to the horror that Victor faces after he succeeds in his task. When Victor sees the ugliness of his creation, his ambition immediately turns to feelings of fear and disgust, and he makes the cowardly decision to run away. After Victor discovers that the monster killed William and framed Justine for it, his guilt consumes him and sends him into a deep depression. When the monster kills Elizabeth and Henry, Victor's main priority becomes vengeance, which in the end leads to his own demise.
Elizabeth!
Not only does Victor suffer from the consequences of his actions, but everyone in his life also suffers on his account. While it was foolish and grotesque for Victor to reanimate life, it's his decision to abandon his creation that ultimately turns the creature into a monster. For this reason, Victor is the real monster and is the source of blame for Henry Clairville, Elizabeth, Justine, and William's deaths, even though he was not the one to physically commit the crime. Even when Victor is on his deathbed, it is obvious that he still has not learned from his mistakes when he asks Captain Walton to kill the monster. The story of Victor Frankenstein remains one of the most famous pieces of literature to this day. This is because Victor serves as an eerie symbol of the monster that exists within all of us. It also shows us how easy it is to become selfish and to hurt the people around us when we let ambition consume us. Victor's story warns us of the inevitable consequences that we face from our actions, and how one wrong choice is enough to destroy us. Now let's take a look at why Walter White is a Promethean figure that still intrigues Breaking Bad fans today. Although Walt appears average and weak in the beginning of the show, his most prominent Promethean traits begin to reveal themselves. It becomes apparent that Walt is clearly a talented chemist when we first see him cooking meth in the pilot episode. Walt's first batch of meth has a 99% purity, the purest level that the Southwest has ever seen.
Pure glass. You're a damn artist.
We also learn that before Walt was a high school teacher, he was a talented chemist who worked at a company called Gray Matter, which he started with his friends in college. Despite his potential for success, he takes a $6,000 buyout on the company, only to find out a year later that Gray Matter won the Nobel Prize, and his friends made $1 million in profit from it. When Walt faces obstacles and gets himself into dangerous situations as he tries to expand his meth empire, he often uses his scientific knowledge as a solution. When Walt is diagnosed with lung cancer and realizes he only has a few more years to live, he becomes determined to find a way to provide for his family. When he joins Hank, his brother-in-law who works for the DEA, on a ride-along, he comes up with the idea to cook crystal meth in order to raise money for his family. Walt decides to partner up with one of his former chemistry students, Jesse, who handles the product distribution. Throughout the series, Walt continues to tell himself that he is doing it all, including killing people, for his family. But his ambition transforms into a thirst for power and an obsession with his ego. Walt's ego is ultimately what makes him so troubled. Making meth is no longer about providing for his family. Instead, Walt lets his obsession with power and his greed take over his life. In the process, Walt not only loses everyone that he cares about, but he loses all sense of a moral compass as he reveals his true colors. Walt spends the last year of his life in hiding as his lung cancer comes back. He dies alone and is filled with regret, but he makes it his mission to get the $700,000 that he made into the hands of his family. In the end, Walt's actions not only led to his own demise, but also destroyed his family and everyone that he had a relationship with. All of Walt's lies catch up to him, and when his wife, Skylar, finds out that he is cooking meth, she hates him and they get a separation. Walt also destroys his relationship with his son, Walter Jr., and his family is never able to trust him again. Walt's selfishness by far has the most destructive impact on Jesse. Throughout the series, he continues to manipulate Jesse to his advantage. When Walt sees Jesse's girlfriend choking from a drug overdose, he watches her die even though he could have saved her, simply because she was a distraction to Jesse in their meth business. He also trades Jesse to another group of drug distributors, and they keep him enslaved for months as their personal meth cook. Even though Walt helps him escape, Jesse will forever be traumatized. Hank feels incredibly betrayed when he discovers that the Heisenberg he has been trying to track down for years has been right under his nose all along, and it is his own brother-in-law. In the end, Hank is shot by one of Walt's business partners. Breaking Bad is so revolutionary because most people start out rooting for Walt. But at a certain point, the question arises, was Walt ever good to begin with? We realize that Walt was always bad. It just took a cancer diagnosis to make him fully embrace his dark side. As we see Walt transform further into someone who will do anything for power, we see him take on the identity of his alias, Heisenberg, and abandon the person he was before altogether. Walt challenges the construct of heroes and villains by reminding us that everyone has the potential to be both. Both Victor Frankenstein and Walter White serve as bleak examples of the human condition. The reason they are so horrifying to their audiences is because they show us that morality isn't always black and white, and the line between good and bad is thinner than we thought. They warn us of what can happen when we chase after power and let our egos take over. Both Victor and Walt seem to have such a strong grip over us because maybe we recognize a piece of ourselves within them. Their stories show us that if we aren't careful, all it takes is a cancer diagnosis or the death of a loved one to embrace our inner Heisenberg or the monster within us.